Hey guys, so I've made quite a big addition to my Sylvania Platinum holding this morning and yesterday, and thought I would sort of go through why. So it's been sort of stagnating really for the last sort of few months since the beginning of the year, really, but sort of £248 million market cap seems a reasonable point to buy. They've just released their quarterly earnings, which looked pretty good up to 31st of March 2022. They've had a slight reduction in ounces produced, bit of an issue with the feed, which they've said largely seems to be resolved, and sort of full year production they're looking at sort of 66 to 68,000 ounces, which is fairly normal. They sort of normally say about 70, 75 in a good year, so it's a little bit lower for this year, but the sort of considerably rising basket price of all the metals, so palladium, platinum and rhodium, has sort of offset that, so less ounces produced for a lot more money. That has meant a net profit this quarter of $21 million, which is very, very good. So just coming down to the results, they sort of do their results in US dollars on one side and South African rand on the other, being sort of South African based. They like to show the sort of currency impact. So yeah, the basket price has increased 23%, so this is a sort of combined average of all of the metals. So that's done well in the last quarter, and this has meant 17% revenue up to 38 million, and sort of net profit up to 21 million. As I say, being sort of less ounces produced for a higher price. So you're looking at 55% net profit for the quarter, 21 million on 38 million. And cash balance of what was a very healthy $110 million to $138 million. So on a $248 million market cap, well, £248 million, so about £110 million now of cash balance. So is that about 40% of the market cap just in cash with basically no debt. So always nice to have, and yeah, you can have a bit more of a detailed read in their quarterly update. It's only 8 pages, or sort of 3 or 4 pages that you'd want to read. The rest is the usual. So yeah, just sort of looking at the metals, platinum sort of still not doing all that well. Platinum sort of industrial use is still largely diesel vehicles, which are sort of getting used less and less. Palladium being sort of the key at the moment, really more in the sort of petrol engines and hybrid vehicles. Platinum has sort of some monetary use, jewellery use and that sort of thing, but it's sort of been a bit unloved for a good while. It was often sort of twice the price of gold, and sort of has tailed off and is now sort of basically half the price of gold. So could potentially see a move back, a bit more jewellery demand maybe. But yeah, there's also another use for platinum in hydrogen, which come back to in a sec. So palladium sort of doing a little bit better on the 5 years. Had a little bit of a spike sort of earlier this year, but has come sort of back down, but still looking pretty good, and sort of contributes a fair amount to the basket price. So sort of last I checked, it's not the easiest figure to find out, but Sylvania were about 62% platinum, which obviously we would be hoping for that to go up. 25% palladium and 12% rhodium. So rhodium obviously being sort of nearly 20 times the price of platinum, does drive sort of a hell of a lot of the revenue. And this is for nitrous oxide reduction. So still is used a hell of a lot in the vehicles. Used sort of quite a bit in hybrids as well. I think all palladium and rhodium are getting used more so per car in the hybrids, because they have to switch from the combustion engine to electric and back again, and that sort of requires more sort of damping in the catalytic converter, from what I understand. So that's pretty good. So even if we get a decline in sort of overall cars required because of electric vehicles, then they're potentially using more of the metals per vehicle. And you've also got just emission standards in sort of the EU and in Asia as well, sort of needing more reduction in CO2. So that needs more of the metals as well. So could potentially see another sort of rise up in the rhodium price and palladium. So on the sort of on the 5-year chart, they look largely the same, palladium and rhodium. Obviously sort of spikes here and there, but we could be sort of seeing another spike up at some point. But the platinum is quite interesting. So been reading a lot about the hydrogen potential use. Seems to be sort of a possibility for larger sort of trucks and buses and that sort of thing, sort of semi trucks and sort of articulated lorries and that sort of thing, where they're predicting that sort of electric may be difficult to use. So they're talking about sort of hydrogen fuel cells maybe going into that a fair bit, but also using sort of green hydrogen for even grid power, just to sort of partially replace the sort of coal and gas power stations. So we would just generate it and put it into the grid. So sort of a lot of hydrogen at the moment, less than 1% is produced sort of in a green way, as they call it, green hydrogen. It's mainly made by stripping hydrogen from fossil fuels, which is a slightly dirty process. So they are looking at alternatives to this, and one of those is the electrolysis of water. So this sort of uses quite a bit of platinum as a catalyst, and sort of doesn't have the emissions of other ways of producing hydrogen. So it's a bit of a gamble. Obviously, it's a gamble on whether the hydrogen sort of economy can really kick off. It's a gamble on whether they'll move from sort of blue hydrogen, as they call it, which is the slightly dirtier hydrogen, stripping it from methane and natural gas and that sort of thing, whether they can move on to green hydrogen, like this sort of electrolysis of water method, and then also whether they would find a alternative to platinum. Obviously, they don't really want to use sort of $1,000 an ounce metal in green hydrogen if they can avoid it. But there's been a lot of sort of industrial use of platinum in the past, and they sort of struggle to find an alternative because it has very unique properties. So yeah, a potential sort of longer term use for hydrogen, and longer term use for platinum in that, if it can work. I mean, there's an interesting read by the CME group, sort of potentially a little bit biased maybe. They are a sort of commodity heavy company, so they may want to be pushing sort of various precious metals and base metals and that sort of thing, but it seems a very detailed sort of overview. And yeah, they're talking about sort of some crazy numbers of renewable energy that we're going to be needing, and yeah, hydrogen could be sort of part of the answer to that. And if that would use platinum in sort of a big way, then that would help. It's also sort of green use, so could be seeing a reasonable sort of price to earnings multiple on the sort of on the back of a green energy type stock. So yeah, certainly an interesting read if you want to take a look. And yeah, I think it sort of helps out Sylvania quite a bit to be not sort of quite so reliant on the sort of ICE vehicles, the sort of diesel and petrol vehicles, because that's sort of, I think, part of the reason for the sort of low price to earnings is that it's sort of seen as a declining industry. We're sort of making the last bit of profits while we still can for the next sort of few years, and then sort of all the metals will be largely unused. But I can still see potential sort of going forward a fair bit. You look at sort of hybrid vehicle projections, still pretty high. Obviously, sort of developing countries can't move straight onto electric. There isn't sort of the infrastructure there. So just sort of as a start, getting them off sort of 20-year-old polluting 4x4s onto maybe even just a hybrid, so that they can still use petrol stations would be a good move. Could be a sort of 75% reduction in CO2, say, from their old sort of saloons and 4x4s. So yeah, I can see the sort of the metal still getting used for a good sort of decade or more at least, and then maybe longer term we have other uses for certainly platinum at least. So yeah, that's my my thoughts on Sylvania, and sort of seems a reasonable place to hide out in the midst of a potential recession, with sort of these cash balance obviously and crazy low price to earnings. So yeah, leave your thoughts in comments below, and like and subscribe. See you soon.